Hi, my name is John C. Havens. I am so delighted to be with a group of incredible friends and thought leaders. This is like the OG world for artificial intelligence and ethics. I wrote a book called Artificial Intelligence, Embracing Our Humanity to Maximize Machines. I also work at the amazing IEEE Standards Association, but today I'm speaking and moderating as John with literally some of the world's cream of the crop in terms of AI and ethics. But we're going to do introductions so you can get to know everyone. We're going to start with a dear friend, a mentor, and a person who says he's okay with me calling him the Godfather, not because of age, but because of wisdom and his influence on me and so many people in the AI ethics world. And we're especially here to celebrate Wendell Wallach, who I lovingly call the Godfather, and the reissue of his book from Sentient Publications called A Dangerous Master. So I'm the moderator, but Wendell, you're the guest of honor. So maybe you can do a quick 1 or so minute introduction for yourself on the book, and then we'll go through all these amazing people, have them do short 1 or 2 minute introductions, and then we'll get to some questions, if that makes sense for you, Wendell. Over to you, Godfather.
Well, I think the Godfather is a bit much, but the fact is, I am so honored to just have this conversation about a dangerous master with these colleagues, many of whom, when the history of this period gets written, will be noted among the most significant people as far as setting the ethics and governance of particularly AI. But with this book, we're going to talk a little bit more about emerging technologies broadly. So all of us have begun to focus on the ethics and governance of AI with the breakout of large language models and generative AI. But when this book was first published, AI was still sort of a fascination of a small collection of us. Most of the people here, of course, were already fully engaged. But many of the other technologies were not getting much attention, though nanotechnology, for example, Gary's somebody who has been involved with nanotechnology ethics going back really to the beginning of this century. Perhaps calling it that makes us all sound a little bit older than we are. But what became clear to me is, and I think it's clear to everybody else in this discussion, it's not going to be just AI, it's many other technologies. And some of them have made significant steps forward. Others, such as geoengineering, are very controversial and very little has been done that. There are possibilities like nanomachines, which still may be 30 or 40 years off, whereas we're still debating what that is. But what is happening is that there's a convergence of all these technologies that are impacting each other. And we are in the midst of being able to engineer on the scale of molecules, engineering on the scale of genes, engineering on the scale of information. And all of that has created a major inflection point in human history. Nobody knows exactly where it's going. Nobody knows what the impacts are going to be. Nobody knows what order the breakthroughs will take place. So we don't know how they will converge on each other. But the importance of artificial intelligence is that it's amplifying all of them. When I decided to write A Dangerous Master, my thought or my drive in writing the book was, what would an average citizen need to understand to be able to join in the very exciting discussions and eventually many of the ethical decisions and policy decisions we are going to have to make about what to embrace, what to reject, and what we need to regulate. So that was the intent behind A Dangerous Master. Like many books, it was probably much too early for its time. So I'm honored that Sentient Publications is republishing it as a paperback. And though there are specific subjects that have developed significantly since the first publication, I have come to understand that the book stands up very well in terms of helping readers understand what the foundational principles are, what some of the science and history is, so that they can begin to engage in these conversations.
Wonderful, Wendell. Thank you very much. And what we'll do now is we'll go to, I'll just call out her name and we'll start with Francesca. And Francesca, if you can talk for a couple minutes about who you are and any aspects of either A Dangerous Master, maybe Moral Machines, Wendell's other seminal book, or any of his work that's inspired you in the context of what Wendell has already said. Over to you, Francesca.
Thank you, John. Thank you. It's really a pleasure to be here with all of you and especially with Wendell. My name is Francesca Rossi. I work at IBM Research at the T.J. Watson Research Lab close to New York. This is where I am now. I am the company AI Ethics Global Leader, which means that I do a lot of work internally and in the IBM's partnerships with other stakeholders around AI ethics. I co-chair the internal AI ethics board, for example, and many other things, that concrete actions that the company is taking to make sure that the technology that is released to our clients is responsible, used in an inclusive way, and so on. I'm also currently the president of AAAI, which is the Worldwide Association of AI Researchers. So I also have a view of where research is going, not just companies and applications, current application, but also research and more, future-looking trends. So Wendell definitely has been a pioneer in many aspects of AI ethics, that mentioning many of the dimensions to be considered and addressed, and many of these dimensions are still not being resolved. So compared to 2015, I think, is when maybe this book was published, but also compared to 2009 when the Moral Machines was published. So, and it's amazing to see also the way he writes these books is in a very informal way, but really being very precise in mentioning the exact dimensions that need to be considered. And I think that in any chapter of one of his books, I think somebody else would write a whole book, but he can be very condensed and precise. So again, these books really stand the test of time, but there are, important changes in the technology and in the perception of the AI technology that have happened since then. One of the changes is that until 2015 or even later, AI was used by companies to produce some services, some apps, some services, some platforms, support activities. Now AI can be used also by individuals directly, okay? And that's a big change also in the ethical dimensions to be considered. That has to take into consideration that the perception of the public on AI has changed significantly since a few years. And another thing that changed is that AI through machine learning, transformer techniques, in some sense, it's surprising to see that the language problem, so how to make AI, generate text that is similar to how a human being would generate, that in some sense has been solved. And that solved from the syntactic point of view, less solved from the semantic point of view, because these systems make strange mistakes about what is true and what is false in the text that they generate, of course, the so-called hallucination. But that is another big change that modified the way people interact with AI. And they made people use AI, and the fact that AI can now generate content like text or images introduces AI ethics issues that were not really central a few years ago, like misinformation, deepfakes. So the fact that AI generates incorrect information that maybe some people, some users don't even check, so they're not aware that it could generate incorrect information, so they spread misinformation because they're not aware, or that other people intentionally use to spread misinformation and therefore undermine the structure of society, even because that many of them are based on being able to recognize what is true and what is false. So again, a new environment, a new landscape of AI capabilities, limitations, and risks. But I think that the main ideas and dimensions and proposals that Wendell put in his books are still very, valid.
Francesca, grazie. And it's like being, it's like getting the band back together. This is like the Beatles. That's the level of people that are on this call. But why don't we go over to Anya, who also is where I first met Wendell, I think, was at the Carnegie Ethics work. So Anya, over to you. And just like Francesca, if you can give a little background about who you are and then the context of Wendell and his importance and also his books.
Thank you so much, John. So I, wear a few different hats. I also work with the IEEE SA, where I have had the pleasure of working with Konstantinos, who we'll be hearing from in shortly, and also with John, of course. But I'm also co-chairing an initiative together with Wendell at the Carnegie Council for Ethics and International Affairs, where we are trying to, in the spirit of the former congressman who spoke about, creating good trouble. We're trying to create some good trouble in the space of how we think about governance of AI. Wendell and I met, many years ago now, and I was really taken aback at the time by not just, his understanding with the issues with the technology itself, but how to then apply a very easy to access frame of ethics. Because too often ethics gets spoken about in the very kind of complicated terms. You have to choose almost a domain of ethics and how to approach things. And what Wendell was trying to do was saying ethics is who we are in this, is who we are as humans, is what we are able to sit with the discomfort, sit with the dilemma, sit with the tension points, sit with the trade-offs, and actually make informed decisions on the basis of it. So that led to this incredible collaboration between Wendell and myself. Has been going on for quite a few years now, where, inspired by his work, both on moral machines and Dangerous Master, been trying to institute a new theory of ethics, how to make ethics more as more of a tool to people to grapple with all of these dimensions of technology. In some ways, there's elements of systems engineering and even reliability engineering in trying to engineer how we think about these issues, how we approach these issues, and creating a new way of interacting with, some of the dilemmas that occur from, both the opportunities it presents, but also some of the risks and the non-beneficial uses of this technology. John was mentioning earlier, the title of the book, Dangerous Master, but of course it is the colon, what comes after, which is really speaks volumes about what the book is about. It's about avoiding it slipping beyond the control. And as a non-native speaker, I remember this was the first time I heard his word. I was reading the book, and he speaks about the juggernauts. Who are those that hold the power, in these new domain of technology, in this new domain of this new landscape, really, of who holds the power, who makes decisions, who decides, who gets to decide, what these systems are being developed for, and who gets to use them, and even the use cases for these technologies. So the book is definitely kind of, ahead of its time, alongside Moral Machines, and trying to think also about the use cases, not just the research and development, but that fundamentally these are human processes, human decisions. We definitely in control, but we have to bring that onus on who takes ownership of decisions being made, and the dilemmas that transpire from that. So just to say, I've learned so much, like Francesca was saying, just learned so much from working with Wendell. There's not a conversation that I leave with him that hasn't challenged me or made me change my view on something. And hopefully, I've contributed a little bit of that with him as well. And of course, just working with the people on this call has just been an amazing thing as well. And many of us met, in the first ever interdisciplinary meeting on AI. So Wendell was even ahead of time on that one, trying to bring us all together, discussing it across, computational disciplines, informatics, robotics, policy, ethics, engineering, bringing it all in. And here we are many years later and still super relevant. Still super relevant. Over to you, John.
Thanks, Anya. Well, another leader who we all know, sometimes the quiet legal voice in the background, but as he's been driving seminal work at IEEE with an AI governance standards working group for years, but also a leading legal mind in general, not just in AI, but technology, is Gary. And Gary, I know you had to leave at the top of the hour. Thank you so much. And I know you've known Wendell for a long time. So your background and any thoughts on Wendell and a Dangerous Master, and thanks for being here.
Great, thanks. Well, it's a delight to be here and to talk about the influence that Wendell's had on me, like he's had on so many of the people on this call. I first met Wendell when he actually reached out to me to call me to talk about nanotech or biotech regulation. I guess he was on the early stages of working on a Dangerous Master. And we just started talking, and I was immediately impressed by his depth and range of interests across many technologies. I'm a law professor, run a center on governance of emerging technologies at Arizona State University in Phoenix. And so, we're a long ways away physically, but he really impressed me as someone coming from ethics, but really had a good grounding both on the science, but also on governance as well, which is what I was interested in. I had no interest or experience in artificial intelligence, so I met Wendell. I don't know if I should thank him or blame him, but now it's, like all of us, it's just completely consuming our lives. I think I'm giving 60 talks to judicial and legal groups this year on AI. So I spend a lot of time talking with judges and lawyers and governmental agencies on how they use AI, and I attribute it all to Wendell bringing me involved into this technology. I was involved in genetics as my science background. So it's sort of an expansion for me to get into AI. I have no technical background in that area, but he's really helped me to do that. We really hit it off in understanding that there's many different emerging technologies, which was really the power, I think, of Dangerous Master. It really sort of laid out that it's just not one technology. That's this sort of whole range and are all sort of developing almost simultaneously. That's they're going to converge in all kinds of important ways. They raise similar but sometimes different issues. And in fact, talking with him, we're talking about how all these technologies being developed at the same time are encountering a lot of similar issues. And based on that, created a conference every year called Governance of Emerging Technology Conference every May. We're going to have our 11th version of it this coming May. We took 2 years off for COVID, so it's really been 13 years we've been doing this. It was based on a discussion with Wendell of just how all these different technologies raise somewhat similar issues, and it's really important to have the cross-fertilization across these issues of people trying to deal with the ethical governance aspects of these different technologies. So in so many ways, Wendell's been absolutely influential to my development and career, and like he has to so many others. And, I really do think he is the godfather of AI ethics. We hear of all these godfathers of AI, but he's really the first person I know of who's really started talking about ethics in a major way with AI. Certainly, I learned a lot from him.
Thanks so much, Gary. I like the name Godfather. I think it's appropriate. But for me, also one of the greatest mentors and friends in my life is the amazing Konstantinos Karahalios, who, Konstantinos, want to call on you next with regards to your influence and your background in terms of Wendell.
Well, my relationship with Wendell, and I'm very, really honored and touched to be here today, is that I have not been influenced by him. And still our trajectories met. And this makes us allies. And this is a different level of, let's say, complicity. Now, where is this deeper alliance founded? It has not much to do with AI. It has to do with something broader, and which is also the tenor in his book, The Dangerous Master. It is not just about AI, it is about many things. It is a desperate fight against the dogma within the technoscientific communities, which is really dangerous. And this is the dangerous master. It is not the technology, it is the mentality, the collective mentality of these people. And what is this? It is that they say, I mean, the scientists, it is not the same like technologies. It's very different species. The scientists, they say, it doesn't matter whether something is good or bad. We're going to do it anyway because it can be done. And we see this, and this is devastating. And this has brought humanity at the brink of extinction. This is where we are. This is the scientists. The second group is the technologists, the technosolutionists. And Wendell has some really very interesting examples there, people who almost broke the world. Do they have good intentions always? Are they innocent? Are the people who design algorithmic systems to make our children addictive innocent? So this is the problem. And another problem is that these collectives are very closed. You cannot influence them from outside. They are what Gilles Deleuze calls a war machine. They obey only to their own rules and dynamics. They don't give really a dime of what the outside world is saying. So how can you penetrate this, and how can you change this behavior? And Wendell has been doing it through his books. He was a voice for a long time in the desert. And John, you know that what we did was to penetrate from within, to subvert, let's say, the church and the priests and the cardinals and so on. Because you cannot do it from outside. You have to do it from within. And this is what we have been doing. And it was not just awareness building, it was also creating the tools and the methods that can help the people who see the problem to do a better job and to resist the pressure. This is let's say, an epic war. It's gonna take 100 years, but we have started it. And it makes no sense to try to convince the people who think otherwise. We just need to find the allies and to align ourselves and to help each other to get there. This is why I'm here. This is why I very much appreciate Wendell, because he had my back when I needed it, and I didn't even know it. Thank you, Wendell.
Thank you, Konstantinos.
Well, thank you, Konstantinos. And just to build onto that, because Wendell, that's how I feel. You know, one thing just to touch on is, for me, Wendell's friendship, and also his wisdom and his straight shooter, if that's a phrase. And also it occurred to me, if everyone doesn't know, behind Wendell, and you'll explain it better than I can, Wendell, but that beautiful stained glass, Wendell created that. He built that. And the metaphor of having the right glass to look through, sorry if I'm working too hard, but still it's beautiful work that you do as a craftsman, is applied ethics. It's about how to see the world. Anyway, moving from that, thanks, Konstantinos. Wendell, I wanted to ask you and then go to Gary. Do you want to comment on anything anyone has said? And then maybe the next question to ask you and to go to Gary is, what does it look like to find a truly, quote, ethical and balanced role for AI and technology in the world? And Konstantinos just gave us one idea. One aspect is we need allies, right? Et cetera, et cetera. So Wendell, over to you and then over to Gary.
Let me just say something general, and then let Gary come in, and I may respond to your actual question later after others have responded to it. But I trust everybody who is listening into this podcast is beginning to appreciate who we have just talking here together. Everyone here is a seminal figure in a different way in terms of this major inflection point where really, I think there may actually be thousands, if not tens of thousands, of different issues and ethical concerns coming to the fore, and that we're going to have to navigate if the next generation is going to have a sustainable future. And I think the fascinating thing is that when I first got into this field, there may have been 100 of us in the world who even cared about these subjects. You know, and Gary is one of the first on the screen that I met, but I got involved in all of this around 2001, and it was so refreshing to find somebody else who had been approaching this, but he had been approaching it more through nanotech, which I knew nothing about at the time. Most of the people I was dealing with were either looking at AI or biotechnology. So those were the two that were on the fore. But I think what's been fascinating as we come into this moment where suddenly we have tens of thousands of people who think they're AI ethicists or involved in the ethics of emerging technologies is a lot of them have no idea that any of us exist, you know, or they may know of one of us or the other. And I find that both refreshing and disturbing. The refreshing aspect is that so many people have come to recognize the importance of these concerns going on. What is perhaps a little disturbing is I wish people knew a little bit more history. And I don't mean just the history of the last 20 years, for example, that I've been involved with, but some of these concerns are as old as time. You know, others like technological unemployment are really a couple hundred years old, but they've come to focus more and more on AI as the main source of automation. So that's you know, it would be nice if people could get a little bit submerged in some of this. I remember being at a conference where somebody was putting forward an idea that I remember Gary Marchand putting forward to me about 15 years ago, or at least a decade ago. And I went over to him and I said, you know, how often are you sitting in meetings where you catalyzed an idea and now other people are repeating it as if it's their idea or it's a new or fresh idea in one form or another. I think that's a tragedy, is we need to build the expertise, we need to build the historical sensibility. It's not that any of us care or have to be quoted. I don't think that's what's important here at all. But it would be nice if people could get a richer sense of the foundations of how we got to this space so that they could build upon it and not constantly rediscover it.
Yeah, and Gary, I'll go over to you just as a quick add-on to that. I'm in Austin, Texas. I did a keynote about AI and ethics, and I mentioned ethically aligned design, which is a compendium document from IEEE that all of you contributed to foundationally, and thank you. A young guy, he was saying, are you in ethics? I was saying, I'm talking about AI and ethics tomorrow. He goes, oh yeah, I'm doing this thing on ethics. And I'm like, well, I helped with all these other amazing people with ethically on it. He goes, that was you? And then he said to me, he goes, thank you for creating an industry. So I say that to all of you, which is now all these young people, this guy's like 21 years old. You know, of course, I told him it wasn't John that did ethically aligned design. It's all of us, all of you, right? But to your point, Wendell, it's like the history of knowing who came before. It also means you save time. Like a lot of this has been thought about before from people like, I just want to say that as an exciting thing, this young guy just made me really happy that the work of yours, Wendell, and so many others like Gary and everyone else on this call foundationally is out there. And now people are saying we have a career, we have a life based on what you, Wendell, really inspired in so many people, including myself. Gary, over to you. Mainly want to get any top thoughts you have before you have to leave, or anything Wendell just said?
Sure. I have a faculty meeting I got to get to. You know, I think it's really interesting. I mean, the one thing I liked about, many things I liked about Dangerous Masters, but one is it, you know, it didn't just come out with a simple, naive solution. It recognized the difficulty of governing technologies, of the tensions between private industry, which is, you know, going after the almighty buck, and that's what they have to do to survive, against, you know, sort of broader societal interests. And we haven't really historically developed good ways to bring those together and have a broader sort of stakeholder type engagement. But some of the earlier technology we did, but, you know, I would say we sort of almost overestimated the risks of nanotech and biotech. You know, they were talked about in catastrophic terms. The New York Washington Post had on its cover that, GMO ice minus bacteria might make humans extinct. Some of the scares about nanotech, there are some real risks there, but if you look back at them, we greatly, I think, overestimated the risks of that. And now we're sort of trying to pull back a little bit. But I think that can cause some, false assurance. And when we come to a technology like AI, which I think is so much more powerful, both for good and bad, that, we can just sort of afford to be complacent and just sort of let it roll out and let it just sort of happen. And I just think it's gotten too powerful of a technology. And so I think it's important to understand the differences between technologies. Like some of, you could use biotech in horrible ways. And ironically, using AI with biotech is a horrible possible outcome to design new, biological weapons and so on. But, the reality is that up until now, biotech and nanotech have not caused a huge amount of harm. But, that's not going to be the case for AI. We see like social media, for example, major harms coming of that. Again, we just sort of took this complacent approach, just let it happen. And now a lot of people looking around and say, this is not the world we wanted to live in. It's not the world we wanted to raise our kids in. And so I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned from different technologies of the past of either under-regulating or over-acting and so on. But still, it comes down to some of the fundamental tensions that Dangerous Master dealt with of, this pacing problem that legal regulation is really bureaucratic and difficult to put in place. And then it's hard to change. How do you use that when you've got this technology moving so fast? How do you get people to care about this? The average American has so many things on their plate that they're concerned about of, nuclear war, of famine, of feeding their family, of epidemics, of economies, of, the democratization maybe collapsing. All these things people are cared about. How do we get them involved in like technologies that seem so complicated? So all these were issues that I thought Dangerous Masters really brought to the forefront and remain very relevant today, even though, as Francesca said, some of the technical details have changed. The fundamental challenges that book put forward are still things we're grappling with today.
Gary, quick follow-up, because I know you got to go. You're the real legal expert, I think. I know a lot of folks on the call have a lot of legal expertise, but with your expertise, can you talk about data? Because with regards to AI systems and these other technologies, a lot of times in AI, people don't discuss the algorithms and the manifestations of the tools don't always factor in data as much as they should. So with your legal expertise, can you talk about that for a minute?
Well, I think, the really burgeoning governance of data privacy is going to hopefully help with that, because as you say, AI is driven off of data, and there's a growing recognition that our data is very private often and can be misused in many different ways and is being. And as a result, we have GDPR in Europe, but we also have now a bill in Congress. I don't know where it's going to go, if it's going to go anywhere, for a national privacy law. But meantime, I think it's now 16 states have adopted their own privacy laws. I think those data privacy laws are going to have a big impact, because they're going to basically determine how you use data. And that includes in AI systems, as the FTC has been warning very clearly that, there's no special rules for AI when it comes to data. So I think, like the International Association of Privacy Professionals, sort of the major privacy group, has now made AI a major part of their activities because of this convergence between privacy and data privacy and AI. And I think that's, going to be where a lot of the action is.
Thanks so much, Gary. Really appreciate your time, and thank you for all the work you do in the industry writ large. Really appreciate it. I've learned I have to come up with a good nickname for you, but I apologize. Wendell is the Godfather. We have to come up with something for you. You're an Esquire, so maybe it's Esquire.
Okay.
I like Esquire.
Congratulations, Wendell, on getting the new book
areas.
Version out, and it's great to see you all.
There's so many areas Gary is leading, so I wouldn't, try to just stick him in the AI bailiwick.
Fair enough. I like Esquire. Esquire's got kind of a cool, counsel at law vibe.
Yeah.
Wendell, I'll defer to you in terms of, I can call on folks. Do you have any comments on Gary's thoughts, or do you want to go to someone in particular, or just kind of let someone speak who has a thought?
Let's let the others speak, because they each have as much, if not more, to say than I do at this stage of the game. I'm getting to be one of the gray eminences. Constantinos, I think, is Doesn't have as much hair as I, but I also think he's moving into the stage of one of the gray eminences. But I just wanted to give one example of when we first all came together. I think it was around 2015, 2016. Omnia at that time was at the World Economic Forum, kind of a right-hand person to Klaus Schwab at that point. And Francesca and I showed up at the very first meeting of really the AI leadership wanting to talk about the dangers that the deep learning breakthroughs may have brought to us. And at that meeting, Mr. Elon Musk showed up and gave the Future of Life Institute a pot of money to seed different projects that would help us move towards solving the AI safety issues of those times. And I joined up with Stuart Russell and Bart Zollman and Gary at that time. And I became the PI on a proposal to bring together the leaders in AI together with the leaders in ethics and governance, and particularly in AI philosophy and so forth. And we had a series of 3 workshops over 3 years, which were really the absolute first that brought those communities together. I mean, they were the leading names in each of those, in all of those communities, but they had never met each other. I mean, we had Danny Kahneman, who just died a week ago or so, was among those at our meetings. So they were really amazing events. But the reason I'm bringing that up is everyone but Konstantinos on this call was at those meetings, and I invited Konstantinos, and we got on the phone together, and he said I should have John come rather than him. So that I think was a seminal moment. Those meetings, they may have, whether they produce what any of us wanted them to produce was less important than the fact they were probably the first meetings to really break people out of their silos and expose them to other ways of thinking of these problems. So with that, I said much more than I wanted to. I would love to hear what our other eminences on this phone call have to say.
I can follow, John, if you think. Yeah, so definitely that was, for me at least, that was the start of this multidisciplinary, multi-stakeholder meetings where scientists and technologists started to understand that these were not just issues with the technology that could be solved by more technology and just talking around, between people expert in technology only. And that was a very important revelation. I also learned from Wendell many positions, many points that I still make when I give talks, and even internally in my own thinking about AI ethics. So the first thing is that even in your books, Wendell, you say, yeah, okay, we have these principles, but then we need to understand how to do things. And so you talk about, you do it top down, you do it bottom up, you do it combined, this and that. So the how is very important. And this ties also with what Costantino was saying, working from within. And that's why I think that, I really put a lot of commitment and energy in this role within IBM, because IBM is a technology company that releases AI supported technology and solution to other companies. And I really wanted to work from within, not being outside and say, oh, companies are doing bad things or doing right things and so on, but say, okay, what can we do here? And once you are within, you discover that, of course, there are many aspects besides these very high level principles in the how. And I think this focus on the how, and it came also from discussions with you. Another thing that came in the discussion with you is the focus, of course, on AI governance, which has been such a a recurrent motive in your activities, and I think that at this point is so much center in public policies, in private companies. Okay, so the governance aspect is very, very important, and so that is, I think, another result of that. Another thing is that I like that it's important to understand, and you say also in your books, that what we have in mind as a possible ideal evolution of the technology and of its role in society is not going to come by itself. We need to be intentional about it. And not just we, meaning the few people here. All the stakeholders, all the actors in society need to play their own role and be intentional about it. So it's not going to come just randomly some desired and results that we want. And so that intentionality, I think it's very important, and it's still a very important dimension of AI ethics. Another thing that you said, Wendell, is that people, they just forget about some time ago about AI ethics. Well, I can tell you that in AI, not AI ethics, is exactly the same. The students in AI, if you cite a paper which is more than 3 years old, they say, oh my God, that's like Jurassic kind of AI. So they don't think it's useful. And of course, this is an approach that is not helpful in understanding and evolving AI in the right direction. It's because AI and AI ethics, I don't see them as two very different areas. No, you want to advance the AI capabilities while being ethical in doing that. So that the fact that the young generations don't just look at what is happening right now and the latest results, and don't consider the history of how things came about, that I think it's something that is not useful. The last thing is that that I want to mention is that so Gary was saying that we need people to be aware of these issues. We need people, because many people need to act upon these issues. But in some sense, right now, we have a situation in which we have too much media attention about the wrong concerns, in some sense, rather than the real issues and concerns that are related to current or the evolution of AI, the power imbalance that was mentioned, the misinformation spread, and the fairness issues, and so on. And instead, the media focuses on like these kind of existential risks, and that may give also the wrong information also to those that have to make decisions about public policies or about governance or about controlling AI and so on, because they may think that these are the issues to be caring about and not the other ones, while I personally think that an incremental approach, and I think you mentioned that also in one of your books, being able to solve and address well the current issues will also put us in the best position to solve whatever issues there will be in the next generation of AI, in how AI will evolve. Because right now, we will now be able to understand the context of the future, the technology of the future, and so on. So that is also another aspect that I think that we still need to help at least the public perception and all the stakeholders and the media with understanding, what are the right issues to care about and how.
And let's see, I have a comment on that, but I want to make sure we hear it. And thank you, Francesca. From Anya and Konstantinos, do either of you have a burning response first? Konstantinos or Anya, if you raise your hand, I'll go to you first, and then we'll go to the other person. If not, I'll just call. Okay, Anya and then Konstantinos. Thanks, Anya. Over to you.
No, I just want to, there was a quote by Wendell. So Wendell and I met, and to Francesca's point, going from the to the what to the how, but also the who and the why. And what working with Wendell really teaches you is that you start really focusing on the who and the why a lot more than maybe you did to begin with. And we met after I had actually given a talk. It was an and here comes this very prominent figure we hadn't met before, and said that he learned something from me. And little did I know that I was speaking with such a seminal figure. I only learned that from his work. And I remember, he then immediately invited me to this meeting where we all met. And I did some digging into, who is this person? And this one line was actually defining for the friendship that transpired for a decade, after this, which is, I'm going to quote him, "It begins with learning to ask the right questions, questions that reveal the pitfalls of inaction, and more importantly, the passageways available for plotting a course to a safe harbor." And I'm a huge fan of poetry, and especially this one poet called David Whyte, and he done, a lot of his poems around the art of asking beautiful questions. And that's what really defines Wendell in his work, is that he's unafraid of asking questions. He's unafraid of sitting with might be uncomfortable in what those questions reveal about the topic, but also about ourselves. And I think, this is exactly what Francesca was saying, we keep asking the wrong questions, in this debate, and maybe focusing on the wrong issues, because a lot of those right questions is deeply, deeply uncomfortable, because it does reveal something about us, about our deeper ethics, about who we are, about what it means to be human, what it will become to be a human. And I think those deeper, profound, almost spiritual issues is probably the aspect that many don't know about Wendell, because a book before all of these books about technology was one called Silent Ethics, and which is rooted in his sort of deep spiritual practice that have gone over for more than 4 decades. And I think it's that framing to technology. Who are we in this? How do we ask those questions? Which in most cases, I think for all of us who've been in sort of, more uncomfortable positions in our work, professional life, in our private lives, it does bring us back to us. And I wish, I agree with Wendell, to have that historical lens, but also to train people that ethics is the practice of sitting with sometimes stuff that is uncomfortable, and to be okay with it, and not let that discomfort cause inaction. So like really kind of use it as a way of mapping where to go, as Konstantinos was saying, what does those alliances look like? Alliances of mind, alliances of spirit, alliances of trying to do the right thing. So with that, Konstantinos.
Yeah, thank you. Wendell, I mean, I hear what you say about collective memory. What we're dealing here with is, let's say, a long-term problem. It is probably 300 years old. It is the moment when science started turning to scientism. And more recently, when technique turned to technosolutionism. Both science and technique have been fundamental for us to become what we are, human beings. Otherwise, we'd be just animals. So, but there is a very deep betrayal there. How to take these instruments of lumiere, of let's say enlightenment, and turn it to their enemies. This is what has been happening. And this is the fight. AI ethics is a proxy to this fight. And I have admitted publicly many times, I don't worry so much about AI. And for me, it is not about ethics. It is about really our responsibility towards humanity. This is much bigger than ethics. And this will take time. the question is, are we capable of building armies that can fight this war in the long term? And what are the resources they're going to need? Intellectual, mental, financial, everything. And this is the question. And where are the allies that can help us build there? Because it's not going to end within a few years. And yeah, a method is, as also Francesca recognized, to go there where the problem is and to start using their resources against what they have been creating. So with this, you achieve two things. First, you build the army that you want, and you weaken the adversary at the same time. And I guess this would be a public, so you will broadcast this publicly. And I don't care anymore. I'm not at the leadership of IEEE, but this is what I've been doing there. And you know this very well. So be patient, my friend. It is not about us. We're just the soldiers in this, and it will take many more years. But if we don't do it, then it doesn't look good. It is not something nice to have. We all realize that there are many extinction-level threats to humanity, man-made, and they're all made through, so based on technology. So technology is not the solution. This is why when you spoke about geoengineering, this is ridiculous. You cannot use the technology that creates the problem to solve the problem. The problem is really a different behavior. The solution is how to organize our lives differently, how to organize living in a city differently. This is why I'm in Paris, by the way, because they are thinking about this. And they're trying to do something about it. So I leave it here. So this cannot be discussed in such a short time, and I don't want to steal your thunders, but your books really talk about this, in my opinion. They are much broader and they're much deeper, and they deserve really respect and recognition.
Yeah, I think we're engaged in a kind of terrorist action with some of these books, that the subject matter is not exactly what the subject is.
Yes.
When Colin Allen and I wrote Moral Machines Teaching Robots Right from Wrong, it's ostensibly about whether computers and robots can be sensitive to ethical considerations, and if so, how, and can they factor them into their choices and actions. But I don't think it's really a book about that at all. It's a sneaky book about ethics, about thinking deeply about who we are and how we function and how we are similar to and may truly different from the artificial entities we're creating. And I think that's also what's going on with the dangerous master. This inflection point in history, technology is only part of it. We all know climate change is part of it, geopolitical tensions. I actually think, and maybe this is, for me, a kind of final plug for those who might wonder whether they should be wasting time thinking about emerging technologies when there's so much else on their platter. And I think that there's something fundamental we all share, regardless of what our political ideologies are, regardless of what we think are the critical problems today or not. And that's a deep disquiet about whether we have created a future for humanity and our children, and whether we've laid the correct foundations. And I think everybody on this call might agree that the trajectory isn't great at the moment. It needs to be nudged onto a much more sustainable trajectory than the one we have today. And I happen to think that technology, in a strange way, is perhaps the most complicit of the elements in that disquiet. Because even though many people don't recognize the pressures of technology on them, this kind of fanciful scientific nature about what can and should be realized is leaving an awful lot of people with a sense that the world we're creating does not have a future for them or their children. And that's what we have to change. We really have to be much more concerted in what kind of future are we creating for what kinds of people, and how does it become an inclusive future that really represents the needs of the mass of humanity rather than the techno elites that will be able to take advantage of some of the more fanciful possibilities.
This is the intentionality that Francesca was talking about, exactly.
Why don't we do this? Because we have about 12 minutes left. I wanted to comment on something because I really appreciate all of you coming on this call. These are dear friends and such wisdom on this call. But maybe if you can, please prepare your ending, sort of like 1 to 2 minute statements. And I'll start with mine now, because I get to speak here as John. I spoke today in Austin, Texas. I've been reading a lot of a wonderful philosopher, if you don't all know him, named Marshall McLuhan, who in 1964 wrote a book called Understanding Media. And Francesca talked about this. His book, he's the one that coined the phrase, the medium is the message. And he says it much more eloquently and with incredible prescience, not just about TV. At the time he was talking about television, but the imaginary that's created when a technology changes society and changes who we are. So my talk was called The Metrics Are the Message. The framework for what we say success is for a society, sometimes we call that metrics. And if the logic is GDP or growth, and that's the main framing of success, then the dangerous master for me is missing all the other things. And I appreciate Konstantinos's, military analogies. But I guess for me, I've been angry a lot in the past 10 years about things like data access and all these things. And ultimately, what I realized brings us all together. The metric is about love. And that might sound simplistic, but I can give you 48 ways to measure it. I can take something and measure my stress, and technology to say my, measuring in an MRI machine when someone's child walks in the room and say that's a corollary for empathy. Okay. But the opportunity, and IEEE, by the way, it's our 140th year, our anniversary. And what we're built on, IEEE, and I'm speaking now as a staff member, is illumination. Thomas Edison brought us, and a lot of other people, light and electricity. What we need to do is illuminate the things that have not been seen. This means nature and human flourishing. Konstantinos taught me the idea of eudaimonia, a Greek term of long-term well-being. And what I like to think about that Wendell has inspired, this is my closing message, is his gift. And I forget who said it, I think it was Anya. He's a beautiful speaker. We can call him Wendell Whitman, Leaves of Grass for Walt Whitman and Wendell. You just inspire me as a person I look up to as a mentor and a friend. And you are so gifted at bringing people together, interdisciplinary. And as I think Anya was also saying, to say things, or Francesca was saying, hard things to talk about. Because we're coming to a time when there's not going to be enough water for everybody, et cetera, et cetera. It's going to be very easy to be angry. But the opportunity is to see ourselves and to see nature and to say, what are the metrics for success we need? We need our kids, all the world's children, and the planet to be safe for generations to come. And when that is established, then the dangerous master moves to the back burner and we can have more great meetings that people like the Godfather have brought together. Thank you, Wendell, for all that you do. Best of luck on this amazing book and all your work. And that's it for me. And I'll go to Anya next for her closing thoughts.
Thank you, John. Well, first of all, I just want to express my deep thanks to Wendell for, like you said, John, for mentorship and guidance and friendship and keeping things real and keeping me real and us real, all the above. In Moral Machines, Wendell, I think, to summarize this a little bit where we are, he has this sentence book that he co-wrote with Colin Allen, right? Colin Allen, if I'm not mistaken, where he says top-down ethical theorizing is computationally unworkable for real-time decisions. And this was, of course, written, 2009, the book came out, if I remember correctly now, the top of my mind. I think Francesca was referring to it as well. And sort of this understanding that there's limitations of how much you can approach ethics from a top-down approach. It has to start at the grassroots. It has to start with the very humans involved in every layer of the process, in every layer of the decision-making process. And I think that's a point that often gets missed in the conversation about AI ethics. And as much as I appreciate the young man coming to you and saying, I would have liked to see that it didn't become one, that it more became one of instituted practices in organizations, in governments, in the ways that we are thinking about this ethics, because it has to be, something that is reflected on every layer. So Wendell has been a pioneer, inspired us, and I had the pleasure of working closely with him. So my end note is just really a heartfelt thank you. So with that, back to you, John.
Thanks, Anya. And another huge thing for Wendell is I got to meet you because of Wendell. And so
Yes.
You have helped my life so much, Anya. Thank you so much for your wisdom and your kindness and your friendship. And thanks to Wendell for that friendship.
Yes. Well, thank you, John.
That's a life that you can say that you have good friends. Francesca, over to you for your final words.
Sure. So I don't have such an adversarial view of technology in war against humans that Costantino painted, let's say. So I have a more like a constructive approach and I think that this is, I felt that this was also one of the lessons that I got from Wendell, which is really to go deep, understand the how, together with all the people that need to be involved in understanding the how and in reflecting and all the stakeholders and so on. So that has been my approach in when I said working from within, I didn't mean working inside the belly of an adversary and pretend that I am on their side instead I'm on the other side. I feel more of the need for collaborating and being constructive and being patient and understanding that different people have in different roles have different drivers and different goals. And so how you get them together and convince them that is good for each one of their roles and drivers to go together in the same direction of using technology for the benefit of humanity, for building a future that we want. So that, I think, is something that I understood from Wendell, but also I would like to finish with this idea that is very important for me that that I also read, and I have here a quote in also from Wendell's books, which is that really AI ethics and all the various activities around it are, and I'm just summarizing one of the sentences in one book by Wendell, is really an exercise in self-understanding, no? So that has been mentioned by Anya, by Wendell already, that really understanding how to embed values, human values into machines so that machines behave and are used in a way that brings them to a certain trajectory requires an attitude of self-understanding and understanding our growth, our evolution as individuals and as societies. And so this is something that I see that is a collateral effect of thinking how to embed values into machines. First, you have to understand what are the values that you want to embed, whose values, and John has been working a lot on this question of whose values, right? So I see that, but I hope that I I would see even more this collateral effect, which is the more we think about the issues with AI and AI uses and the risks and how to address them and the various dimensions will help us understand better ourselves and where we want to go as human beings. Because after all, my goal is not as a scientist and technology is not to advance AI. That's not the ultimate goal. No, the ultimate goal is to have grow and to help others grow as well in the right direction, also through the technology and the science. And I know that science and technology can play that role in helping humans to grow and evolve in the right direction. So that I think is the right connection and the right direction to consider from the technology to the growing of the human being.
Well, thank you so much, Francesca. And if anyone watching this video couldn't tell, if the person that inspired all these people and wrote those books, namely Wendell, if you can't tell the depth of who he is by these amazing people and their response, read the book. That's the short answer. Thank you so much, Francesca. Konstantinos, over to you for your final thoughts.
Yes, I mean, I would like to go back probably the intentions of Wendell, and he can correct me if I'm wrong. It is about, let's say, making the argument that we, scientists and technologists, should start recognizing our responsibility for the outcome of what we're doing, not just of the technical output, and assume this responsibility and change our behavior and our practices. So this is not easy because there is a very widespread, let's say, creed within the technoscientific community. It is different. For the scientists, it is doability. If something can be done, I do it first. And this is totally irresponsible. And I hear this when I talk with people. It is very interesting. So what do you tell to these people? Well, I don't tell them anything. I go to war against them. There is no love there. There is nothing. They're simply dangerous. These are the dangerous masters. It is not the computers. Then it is the technosolutionists. Okay, we have a problem that we created with technology. We solve it with more technology. Let's take Los Angeles. So we solve the problem of atmospheric pollution through replacing the cars with electric cars. No, the problem is not the car. The problem is the urban planning of Los Angeles. There is no technical solution to this. We create more problems than we solve. And this is IEEE. We think this way. We electrify everything, then we solve the problems. We're not going to solve anything like this. Nothing, nada. What do you say to these people? So I'm sorry, I have a few more years to live and I have no time to lose. So, and I have tried to use my time, and this is an inspiration from Wendell by really building counter collectives to them. And sometimes there is no dialogue possible. We have to admit this. Where it is possible, as Francesca very eloquently said, yes, of course, by all means, in the gray areas and so on, but it's not always possible. And we have to be prepared, because if we want to defend our position, it is not our personal positions, it is about something else, it's not about us, then we must also admit the toughness of the situation. And this is why my vocabulary is so tough. It is not that I'm tough. I am a guy who likes harmony. I don't like any fights. I've never really altercated with anybody. But here, there is no space really for tolerance. I'm not tolerant, I must say. And sorry to say this very, very clearly here. So this was not very helpful, but this is what I think.
Well, thank you, Konstantinos. Wendell, over to you to close this out, but I'll just say your strength combined with the wisdom and the other thoughts here, it's all part of it, at least for me. And I, as a person who reveres you, Konstantinos, as I do Wendell, thank you for your strength. And I agree, there's certain forces you can't work around. You have to protect kids with the age-appropriate design work you've helped lead. Wendell, we're going to end here and say thanks again to Sentient Publications for reproducing your magnificent tome, your book. And before we close out, what are your final words? How are you thinking about A Dangerous Master now with all these friends talking about your work and your inspiration?
Well, I'm blown away actually by the nice things people have said, but more importantly by the serious things that people have said. We don't all have exactly the same worldview, but we are a community with relatively similar commitments, and we're each going to pursue those in our own way. And I think that's probably the message for the future. The message is pretty hard problems here. And they're beyond any one of us to solve, and they're beyond any one of our abilities to capture in what happens to be our personal philosophy or the choices we've made on who we are and what we're going to be about. And I hope what's being encouraged, and I hope what we represent in terms of a first step or two, is there is kind of a community here of like-minded people who are working in very different areas, but they're very complementary. And it's all coming out of a deep concern for the planet, for humanity, for where we go from here. My hope is that as a first step, the next generation gets really good at collective problem solving, knows how to put together a table where you have many different voices represented that can listen to each other and come up with some kind of a synthesis of the best way forward. It may not be the perfect way forward, but the best way forward. And I do think we have to always be cautious about who we let to be the primary decision makers. I will not believe in AI as as all the grand things that are promised until somebody shows me an AI that can make good ethical decisions, and somebody shows me a solution to greed, fear, and ignorance. I don't see anything speaking to those, those three devils. So, AI is a great tool, but it can also be a tool that is the extension of greed, fear, and ignorance as opposed to the solution to it. And I think that's going to be true for all of the technologies. We don't have a shortage of tools. We don't have a shortage of brain power to work through these very difficult challenges. But we may have a shortage of intentionality, being informed enough that we understand what the problems are that we're trying to address, and the intentionality to truly work together to solve them.
This is John saying thank you again to Sentient Publications for letting us talk about our dear friend Wendell Wallach. I call him the Godfather. I see all roads lead to the Godfather because he is so gifted at bringing different voices together, but people like you've seen today that have such important, critical things to say. Thank you, Francesca, Konstantinos, Anya, and Gary, who left us. And Sentient, we wish you the best of luck with our dear friend's book, A Dangerous Master. Thank you so much for watching.